you mentioned there's principles, not hard and fast rules. Do you both suggest to your students or to new writers that you're working with that they start with an outlining process before they go to script, or does it depend on the creator you're working with? Is that not for everybody?
Well, I mean, yeah, yes. I think if somebody has a white hot passion, they need to get an idea down on paper, fine. But at a certain point, put a structure on it and then change it if you need to as you go along.
Yeah, I try to make it as practical as possible, and 3 times in the course of a semester, I will announce, for the next hour I'm going to blue sky. I'm going to give you some history or some theory. But mostly it's about the nuts and bolts of being a professional writer. So if something I learned from Denny when I took over his NYU class 6 years ago, if the current accepted way of working is to do a pitch or do plot first, that's what you do. In my own experience for the last 20 years of writing comics, that wasn't an issue because I worked with people that knew me and I knew them, and we could do it with a conversation. Since I have done comics since officially retiring, I've had to prepare a pitch, 3-4 paragraphs to tell the story as the first step. That's the way it's done, so that's the accepted professional procedure, and so that's the way you do it. And it's a pretty good way because it forces you to think out your story.
And you mentioned, plot first, and I wonder if everyone in the room is familiar with those two. There's sort of two
Slide.
yeah, and I put up here, there's sort of two kind of styles that get talked about. One is referred to as the Marvel style, which is the plot first script, which you just mentioned, and maybe Danny being the longtime Marvel editor when that was, I think, probably at height of popularity. Did you see that script style a lot? Maybe talk about it a bit?
That's all I ever saw. Marvel,
Yeah.
that started out, it's called Marvel style, because that is how Stan Lee would work with Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, and that, of course, is why there are so many controversies now, because very often it wasn't even written down. There would be 2 guys sitting in a room.
Or in passing each other.
Passing each other, right. Or, they'd talk, or Stan would write up a short outline or a long outline, So it's a plot discussion, a plot description. Over the years, that would evolve to where some writers would write a plot that was 25 pages for a 20-page story. And so it may as well have been a full script. They did everything but put the dialogue in. But Denny and I were just talking about this the other night, actually, that I think it was their way, say, I'm thinking of Chris Claremont in particular, of having a conversation with the artist and with the editor. So it's almost like, here's what I'd like to do, and here's kind of how it should feel. And remember that movie where this happened? Well, it should be something like that, but not so much that they could sue us. And, so that's called the Marvel style. It'd be like sitting with a friend over dinner and talking about. So the other one is more like a screenplay, where panel 1, Spider-Man swings in the window, my spider sense, and then Spidey says, my spider sense is tingling, there must be danger, and then panel 2, a bullet was, but everything is described.
Right. Captions, dialogue, special,
everything
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So that's the maybe we should help you. Yeah.
Of the bunch of really good professional writers who do comics that I know, I can't think of 2 that do those full scripts the same way. When I first started, there was at DC, they had some kind of model, but it really didn't make a lot of sense to do a script that way. I was working for Giordano, who was a miraculously good editor in that he could draw good work out of you without ever giving you a direct order or instruction. But I changed it, and I've taught creative writing to hundreds of people, and a number of them have become professionals, and they don't do it exactly the way I do it. So it's one of those things, the right way to do it is the way that works.
Well, which is what makes it different, oddly, from, like, if you're writing a movie, there is a, there's software, there's a format. Yes. If you're writing TV, there's a format. There are formats you can buy. Somebody was asking me at the table before, do you adapt the screenplay format? some people do that. I don't recommend it because then you think you're writing a movie and you get in all sorts of trouble that way. But you know, I think Brian Bendis is probably the best known person who was adapted. He's got a book out too, right? On comics writing. But yeah, there is no one format. You just have to be able to convey the story to your editor and to your artist.
Yeah, if you're writing TV or film, it's probably a good investment to buy a script writing program for, I don't know, the last time I bought one was what, about $100? Because that really saves you a lot of stupid typing type labor. It does all of the spacing, which is the trickiest part about writing a script to be acted. That stuff happens automatically. But for comic books, it's the way that works.
But needless to say, there are entrepreneurs who have come up with software to sell for comic book scripts.
I have no doubt of it. Well, if it works, it works.
And there's probably freeware you can get also.
There's also a lot of comic creators who have developed templates that you can actually get from their websites. I know Anthony Johnston, who, if you know, writes Wasteland and Umbral and Fuse. He actually developed a template for Scrivener. If any of you use Scrivener as a writing program, he's developed a whole thing for that in tutorials. Jim Zub has a lot of stuff on his website as well. I want to open it up to questions. So if people have questions, just come over here and I'll hand you the mic. You can sort of form a line, and if anybody has a question while you're doing that, I'm just going to throw out a quote that I saw from Denny O'Neill on a blog post that he made not too long ago. Sometime, it was only like a month ago or something like that, but you were talking about knowing what to leave out, and I'll just read it really quick. It says, art which includes storytelling involves a process of selection. The writer determines which incidents, real or imagined, will best tell the story, and those are what he shares with us. And you went on to talk about in that post sort of what makes sense to include in your script and what things you can either assume that the reader is going to understand or assumes that they knows. Do you find that that's something that writers often struggle with, is they're either putting too much in or they're leaving too much out? Like finding that balance in terms of the comic page.
I find that beginners often are not aware of structure.
Yeah.
As to what to put in or put out. The problem for comic books in our era is things aren't established. When Mary and I got married 25 years ago, 26 almost, she was teaching at an 8th grade school in Brooklyn. And she had gotten reintroduced to comics after not seeing them forever and ever. She wanted to read these things because we were going to parties with the people who were creating them.
Yeah.
She couldn't, correct me if I'm wrong, sweetheart, she couldn't find a way into the story because what's their names? What are they fighting about? Where are they? Who is this person that just came from nowhere? Because so many of the writers were first fans. Now, we have, all of us old people in the room, have a friend named Martha Thomas. She used to work for DC. She's probably read every Marvel and DC superhero for the last 30 years. Martha can tell you what's going on, but I couldn't when I was editing the stuff sometime because, you know, the writer would have mentioned the proper noun, and 6 issues later he would mention it a second time and expect me to remember who this person was and what had been established. So they assume too much. That's also a problem with people who write things other than comics. You know it in your guts. It's your childhood. It's your parents. Or it's the comic book you have been reading since you were 4 years old.
I think it's also that you want to show your fellow writers that you're cool and you don't have to do that like that kid stuff like establishing names and places.
Yeah, well, if that's true, Danny, then that's profound stupidity. That's
I've never
the
heard
job.
anyone say that, but I certainly get that feeling.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.